L'Shana Tova, everybody. Mazel Tov. You have made it to the second day of Rosh Hashanah. You have made it to the last sermon of Rosh Hashanah. Perhaps an even greater Mazel Tov is in order for that. You have seen about 1/3 of my wardrobe and probably 2/3 of my tie collection. So again, Mazel Tov for that. For this final sermon, I wanted to do a couple of things. The first is to preview the adult education offerings that are coming up for this coming year, beginning on October 20th. There was a request by a number of congregants to have a more basic Judaism class that didn't assume the kind of background knowledge that many of our members do have, because many of our members don't have that sort of background. They haven't been privileged with a Jewish education from early on in their childhood. So we're going to be doing the 6 W's of Judaism, and that will be previewed in just a moment. But I also wanted to lay out what some of the upcoming issues will be for Yom Kippur that relate to what we have spoken about already during Rosh Hashanah. So without further ado, we move to the 6 W's of Judaism. So the 6 W's of Judaism, or the Torah on 6 feet, or the Torah on 1 foot 6 times, take your pick. The very first W that needs to be addressed is why be Jewish? If you can't answer the why question of why be Jewish, then all the other W's and all the other letters of the alphabet are relatively meaningless. I believe that the first answer, although there are several, the first answer to why be Jewish is that it provides a structure for our relationship to God. Many people say that they are not religious, but they're spiritual. Geh gesund. But how do you shape that spirituality? How do you frame that spirituality? How do you channel that spirituality into something that helps connect you with the transcendent on a regular basis? Because spirituality is a posture, yes, but it also involves a muscle. And if you don't if you don't have a discipline, a self-discipline about connecting to the transcendent, then it is unusual and rare that you will be able to achieve such a connection. And for those of us who feel like life is emptier, or perhaps even empty, without that connection to the beyond, to the transcendent, to that which connects us to what is beyond ourselves, then having that sort of framework and discipline is absolutely essential. Part of what is so beautiful about Judaism is that it is necessary to be a Jew with other Jews. You can't really be a Jew on an island. Robinson Crusoe, it turns out, was a 12th century Islamic parable, the origins of Robinson Crusoe anyway, to talk about whether or not the philosophical life could be achieved in isolation and the religious life could be achieved in isolation. And the Jewish answer to that question is no. A Jew can't be on an island. You've got to be in a community. And how acutely do we feel that in the midst of this pandemic? We need other people to live, and we need other people to be Jewish. And not just that we need other people, but we need other people who share our values. The idea of synergy is that when you've got a group of people, they can do more work together than the sum of their individual efforts. We see that already in the Bible, we see that in the Talmud, and we find that to be true in our world and our Jewish community as well. We bring added incremental strength when we come together to pursue our goals and our values as a community. Judaism doesn't just offer a structure for our connection to God, but it provides a structure and a ritual framework for our lives, for our behaviors, for our waking and work life, and we'll see that detailed in a bit. But why be Jewish? One answer to the question is that in the kind of desert of time. Being Jewish provides signposts and guideposts and markers to help us make one moment distinguished from all the others. And perhaps my favorite reason to be Jewish can be summed up in this expression in Yiddish, es ist schwer zu sein Yid. Judaism demands that we do better. Originally, it's tough to be a Jew, which is what the Yiddish translates to, might mean that other people make it tough for us to be a Jew. That was true historically, and there are places and times when it is still true today. But it also needs to be said that Judaism demands that we improve. It's tough to be a Jew because we are constantly on an upward slope. We are constantly trying to improve ourselves. And if you're not being a good Jew. Some people say to me, "Oh, Rabbi, I'm not a good Jew." And they might expect me to say, "Oh, no, you're fine. You're good just the way you are." That's not the way Judaism works. You might be a fine person, but being a fine person doesn't mean that you're a fine Jew. And if you're not on that stairwell, right, that scaffolding that brings you up incrementally in a certain direction, then you are A, ignoring one of the gifts of Judaism, and B, you're also sacrificing your life and the ability of your life to be a work in progress, and your complacency is depriving you of an opportunity to make yourself and your life more enriched. And finally, why be Jewish? Because we're awesome. Let me just move my picture so that you can see. Yeah, these are all cool Jews. It's just so much fun to be a part of this people, to be a part of this culture. We are awesome. How to be Jewish. So, of course, Rav Shai is going to tell you that the most important way that you're Jewish is by learning how to be Jewish, right? Without study, you don't really know what our values are. Studying in and of itself is a value. And when we go out and we are in the world, there are so many dizzying options. There are so many competing voices for our attention. How do we know? How do we have a prism through which to filter all of the different ideas and options that we have in the world? It's by studying what Judaism tells us is important and then talking in our communities about whether that continues to make sense. So one other way that we think about how to be Jewish is through prayer, and not just talking with other people, but talking with ourselves and talking with God, and then converting those ideas that we have garnered through learning and prayer into acts of loving kindness. Part of what comes out of being Jewish is that we cannot ignore the suffering of our brethren, and how far we extend the circle of who our brethren is a question that continues to be posed to us as we live in a multicultural society. And even in Israel, who are our brethren? Who are the people who live within our midst, who need to be treated as one of us, not necessarily in every way, but in all of the ways that extend benefits and rights to them? The way that Judaism codifies or regulates our behavior is through the halakha. And halakha can best be translated as walking with God on God's path. Halakha is the path of God and the path to God. And what our sages have done so successfully, really for 3,000 years, is to figure out a way for us to be in the world where we can accompany God, where God can accompany us, and where we can move toward a greater state of holiness. And that only happens through constant, or at least consistent, reflection, which is what we're doing now with Teshuvah. Teshuvah is where we take a look at our path and to see where we need to adjust our orientation in order to be better placed on that path. And of course, cheshbon nefesh is to take that idea of looking at ourselves on the path and bring it up so that it's not necessarily about where are we on the path, but are we on the right path at all? Is this in the larger frame of our lives? Is this what we want to be doing? Is this who we want to be doing it with? Is this how we want to be living our lives? So it goes from the more micro questions of teshuvah and where we are on our individual path to asking the question more broadly, are we on the right path at all? Because there are different paths, and it doesn't mean that there's only one path that is righteous and one path that is holy, but that question does need to be addressed with a kind of awareness and self-consciousness that Judaism demands of us. When to be Jewish? I already referenced this in Why to be Jewish, but in this great span of our lives, in order to make certain moments distinctive, in order to create a kind of spiral where we move through time by touching the same points as we move through the year, such as Shabbat and all of the holidays, we bring an added measure of sophistication, an added measure of maturity to each of those holidays, but yet we come back around to some of the same foods and some of the same customs and some of the same places in order to make what has changed all the more salient. And of course, these great life cycle events, these milestones in our lives, such as the B'nai Mitzvah, the Chuppah, and eventually death, these are milestones and transition points that Judaism has spent a wonderful amount of time thinking about and created a framework for these events that really reflects a deep world wisdom. Where to be Jewish, right? The ganze Welt is where to be Jewish. Melochol haaretz kavodo. The entire world is full of the divine presence. It's not just in synagogue. If we confine Judaism to just being in the chapel or in the sanctuary, as beautiful as those places are, and as much as we might miss them right now, then we are stripping Judaism of its vitality and of its richness. What makes Judaism more than a religion is the demand that Judaism places on us, and forget the demand, the opportunity, the invitation that Judaism gives us to express our commitment to Jewish values and Jewish ideas wherever we are, from the beginning of the morning to the end of the evening, to how we drink, to how we shop, to how we vote, to the bedroom, to the office, to nature, to school. And what distinguishes Judaism from other religions is its breadth of wisdom that it gives us, that for so many people in the diaspora and over the course of the last 200 years, we have drifted away from, because Dina de Malchuta Dina, because we have been so satisfied with the law of the land and the culture of the land that we have neglected our own traditions about how to be outside of a religious prayer setting or an explicitly religious setting. And so one of the things that I think is so important to do in the coming years is to refamiliarize ourselves as a culture with how Judaism invites us to be Jewish outside of the synagogue. And who is Jewish? Another great question. So in this class that I'll be running beginning October 20th. We'll talk about Jewish ethnicities. We'll talk about Jewish leadership roles. We'll talk about the matrilineal principle. Whoever's mom is a Jew, that person becomes a Jew, or conversion and how conversion works. There's a statement in the Talmud that one who rejects idolatry is an Israelite, is a Jew. There's very much an understanding by the time we get to the Talmud that idolatry isn't just about those little idols that seem to represent gods for different aspects of life and of nature, but idolatry is anything we invest ultimate value in. And so the names of idols have changed since the biblical period, but idolatry is still rife amongst us. Somebody who works for the betterment of the world, that's somebody who's a Jew. But somebody who's compassionate. The Book of Education, a 13th century text, Sefer HaChanuch, says that Jews are Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. I love that. That we are compassionate ones, children of compassionate ones. And the idea there is that you always have the option of looking at any issue through the filter of justice, strict justice, or compassion. And without neglecting justice, without relegating justice to the margins, we have to include Rachmanut, compassion, in our understanding and in our evaluation of every issue. And finally, somebody who stands up for what's right. You know, one of the reasons that Charlton Heston was cast as Moses in the Ten Commandments is because he was a strong guy. We think of Moses as a legislator. We think of Moses as somebody who spends 40 days up on the mountain getting the Torah and getting the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, getting the 2 tablets of covenants, right? But Moshe is also the one who sticks up for the Midianite women when they are muscled out of their place in line at the well by these Midianite shepherds. We don't know how many shepherds there were, but Moses was no longer the prince of Egypt when he was in Midian. He was a great big nobody. And he rose up, right? The verse says, Vayakom Moshe, right? Moshe stood up and he beat back those Midianite shepherds who were trying to bully the weak and the vulnerable, who could have been bullied as a result of being women at that time. And he made sure that the people who were in their rightful place in line got to the well first. That's who we are descended from. And what is being Jewish? Being Jewish is a hashkafa. It's a worldview. And the worldview is that the entire world is filled with the divine presence. Normally, we walk around in a Shema mentality. A Shema mentality is knowing that one day everyone will come to recognize the sovereignty of God. When we say the Shema, we're not saying the Shema that's found in the Torah. We're saying the Shema that's found in the Talmud. And that was why the rabbis who wrote the Talmud put the Shema in the prayer book. And their understanding of the Shema was as follows. Listen up, Israel. Shema Yisrael. Adonai Eloheinu. God, our Lord, now, Adonai Echad, will one day be the one Lord for everyone. Which means that right now, God is not the one Lord for everyone, and so we have to work toward that reality. But coming up on Yom Kippur, we get to indulge in a reality that only offers itself up to us once a year, which is the Baruch Shem mentality. Baruch Shem Kavodo, blessed is his holy name, blessed is the name of the one whose presence is with us. Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. His kingdom is eternal. His kingdom is now and forever. We know that intellectually, and we can admit that once a year, but the other 364 days of the year, we whisper it. We still know it. We still remind ourselves of it, but we don't dare say it out loud, because by saying it out loud, it might diminish our motivation to making God's presence more visible, more tangible in this world. And so we only allow ourselves to say it out loud and to declaim it out loud on Yom Kippur. Being a Jew, what is it? It's a posture toward God. It's a covenant with God, but not just with God, but with all of creation. And according to the Talmud, that covenant can be summed up in one, right? In a couple of words from the prophet Habakkuk: seek me and live. Seek me and live. Not just to seek me or God in the Torah, but in all of creation. Being a Jew is being a contrarian. The word Hebrew, ivri, means that literally, la'avor means to cross over. La'avor. So an ivri or a Hebrew is one who has crossed over, has crossed from one side to the other side. Originally, it may have been meant geographically, that we went from one side of the Euphrates to the other side of the Euphrates. But the way the rabbis understand it is that we've gone from paganism and polytheism to monotheism. And what that means is that sometimes we stand on one side of an issue or on one side of a value, even when the rest of the world is on the other side. We are contrarians. And we maintain our belief and our commitment to pursue the righteousness of the values that flow from all of us having one God and being children of the same God. Judaism is a challenge to improve. It's a legacy that we have inherited, that we are the beneficiaries. It has benefited us to have this rich tradition to look back to help us figure out where we should go in the future. Judaism is a path and a direction toward a more free society, a more free world, a world where people have more dignity, and a world where more people are included in that freedom and dignity. And to best accomplish that goal, we are in a covenantal community where we can work together with one another, where we celebrate with one another, where we mourn with one another, where we work together in order to fulfill the goals and the values of our covenants. L'Shana Tova, everybody. I hope that we can continue our holy work and our holy covenant in person, bimheira v'yameinu, soon and in our days. L'Shana Tova, techatevu v'techatemu.